Buddy, welcome back to Chapter 3. Uh, this week we're discussing social dance and jazz, the birthplace of jazz in America. And so, Catching as the Smallpox is the name of the chapter, and it's referring to just the complete wave that popular music took. And a big part of this was information technology. This also spans a really important period of American history. This is the early 20th century. So we have World War One results in significant technological advancements, in particular information technology advancements, such as radio and sound film. Prior to this, films had been silent films, which you may have seen, like Charlie Chaplin films and other films, just reels of those in the past where there was lettering put up on the screen, but there was no actual sound. So, uh, again, the fascination with novelty leads to modernism and eventually postmodernism. And one of the biggest tools of this was what Americans paid attention to when they didn't have the internet, which was the radio. And this is a very early form of a radio called a crystal set. And when I was a kid, I picked up one of these at a store called Radio Shack that doesn't exist anymore. And we built our own radios. And basically, it's harnessing the power of crystals to garner radio waves frequencies in the atmosphere and collect sound that is then uh, explorated and re-understood so that you can transmit audio signals. Something that started in the late 1800s by Marconi in Italy, and it was a maritime need in the beginning, so meaning ships could speak to the shore or ships could speak to ships. Okay, and then we have developments like the vacuum tube. So Edison pops out again. We had the phonograph with Edison, and the phonograph had really taken off. And in this chapter, they discuss what's called the PROs, the Performance Rights Organization, like ASCAP, American Society for Publishers and Composers, BMI, and CSAC were the original kind of almost like unionizations for songwriters that still exist to this day. So that all begins in the 30s, but I'm jumping forward. This is the transistor radios you may have seen your grandpa walking around with. And this was something that instead of having earbuds in your ear, you might have had this with a sports game or a talk show on it walking around. So there you go. All right. So radio network, it's a new medium. 1906 is the very start of it. World War One is really where things take off and the industry just explodes. And there's basically a radio in every home, and it's kind of like having a TV in every house. I mean, people would go home and listen to radio shows. So you had the Bing Crosby show. You had just all kinds of shows early on in the beginning, including like horror shows where they're just describing, you know, I don't know, it's a dance that goes terribly wrong, or there's, think of Goosebumps for radio. There you go. So this is where our three-letter name companies first appears, ABC, CBS, and NBC. So there's more about that in the chapter. It's a really important part of information technology as we know it today, because so much of what we use as information technology was really originated in transmitting first signals for basic human survival, but ultimately music and entertainment. Microphones. So a microphone is basically a speaker. So you're speaking into a speaker, and it transmits through signal to a bigger speaker and amplifies or basically expands the sounds that you've made. So if that's a guitar or you singing or whatever it is, right? And so the microphone, this is actually a crystal microphone that's featured, but very early microphones very much so look like speakers. And so they were very susceptible to wind or any sort of anything that would move the cone, or in this case the crystal that's located inside that capsule there. So it's a really interesting way that humans first initiated on information technology. And you have a couple more examples here. There's another crystal example, I believe, and a ribbon microphone. Ribbon microphones were later. It's a different type of technology, but it's still used today quite a bit because they sound really great. Analog stuff, meaning not digital, not ones and zeros, tends to sound really great. So let's get to the music, right? So some big, huge films come out, and realize that there wasn't a ton of film going on. It's an extremely new medium, and that means that what did come out was ubiquitous. Most people knew what it was. or may have heard of it, and it certainly made its way around the world eventually. So you have kind of the death of vaudeville that takes place in the 20s, and this is a big part of it. The jazz singer. It's also part of the craze, the jazz craze that takes over the U.S. As you'll read in this chapter. That's a really significant influence on American culture as well as social dance. And the music that's in this film is really significant. It was connected with the public in a meaningful way at the time. The Broadway melody. This is when the Oscars begin to appear. I believe they started actually in the late mid 20s, but they were already an extremely important institution in cinema at the time. So the Broadway melody and really Broadway and Tin Pan Alley that comes up in our next chapter, which is kind of where the music that you know today appears from. The Broadway melody is a huge part of that because it's the singing, dancing, doing it all on film. And that's really kind of where we step into the last 100 years of media that you and I are familiar with from childhood and beyond. And in 1929, of course, everything was wiped out by the Depression in many respects. I mean, things were so interconnected, and there really wasn't safety nets in place financially for both people or government. And people did live kind of on less means at the time. And so the Great Depression actually, in many ways, had an incredible effect on music, though, because it's what people fell back on to really enjoy life and find meaning in such depravity. Okay, this is where we start to get to what I really want to talk about in this chapter is Louis Armstrong, Duke Ellington, and also some of the Latin dance music that came up in this period. So Louis Armstrong is probably the most influential American musician in history. I'm going to go out on a limb and say that personally. That's what I think. But undoubtedly the king of jazz, the father of jazz, the sort of the apex of jazz performance, shown here with the famous handkerchief in his hand, which many would have thought might have been to clean his horn, and it probably was, but it was also to hide what he was playing from would-be copycats. Yeah. So Armstrong often spoke of the importance of maintaining balance between improvisation and straightforward melody and treatment. This is why this period of time, jazz is the American song music. I mean, and it's across cultures, right? What starts out as it was once referred to as Africanized popular music becomes just everybody's music. It's a serious social connector, and all cultural influences begin to coalesce and create what we know today as R&B or Motown or hip hop. All of this is derived from this very earliest form of the truly American music that's just noted to us as a country. So rhythmic drive, swing, and emphasis on solo and instrumental virtuosity is a huge part of this. So you can play, you can sing, you've got great timing, you're paying attention to each other, and we're going to look at some examples of that in our listening in the second lecture for this. So we'll talk about Ain't Misbehaving, but it's the song that we're going to discuss in the next lecture, as well as scat singing. Make sure you know what that is. That's in our listening examples as well. And next we come to Duke Ellington. So this is the birth of the really kind of codified jazz orchestra. So Duke Ellington, a master and sort of a diplomat for jazz, who ends up traveling the world and collects cultural influences from the Far East and beyond and influences those into jazz eventually. But at this period of time, it's he's New York's sort of elegant jazz music that everybody just cannot deny is simply unbelievable. And so we're listening to a very early Duke Ellington recording of East St. Louis Toodaloo. Okay, so soli is a term that you want to understand out of this. So soli is when all of the horns play together. And again, the thing you want to keep focusing on is what is critical listening. Critical listening is being able to identify elements in the music and say what's happening. That's a snare drum. That's a horn. Those are a set of horns. Are they saxophones, trumpets? These are all things that you want to be listening throughout this semester to try to really understand music more deeply, is for you to be able to identify some of its elements and appreciate it more deeply. So listen for James Bubler Miley on this song, as well as the soli, which is where you'll hear it about 2/3 of the way song through. All the horns play together. They play the same melody together in harmony. And that's a sax soli, or in the case of this, I believe it's called tutti, a full band soli. All right, and finally we come to the rise of Latin dance music. So what's so cool about Latin dance music is it's basically South American and Central American dances. So these are dances that are done against a specific rhythm that I'm going to show you here in a second. There's many of these different clave patterns. Clave means key. It's the key to both the dance and the interlocking pattern of the song. But also that they took those dance forms and those musical dances and created jazz and Western instrument influenced versions of them. Western instruments being like saxophones and drum set, like a combined percussion apparatus, which is known as the drum set, as well as banjo and other instruments. So these are like European instruments derived, right? And so they're taking sort of a European and American song forms and putting South American dance patterns with it, and you end up with what's Latin dance music and Latin jazz eventually. So the son clave. So son it's a short for sonar, which means to sound, and clave means key. So the sound key is what that means. So this is 4/4 time, which means there's 4 quarter notes in each measure or metric piece of music. So the music's going to be divided up in a linear path with several measures, and each one of them is going to have beats 1, 2, 3, and 4. And a further division of those beats shows us where each one of these clave clicks are at. So you have 1E and 2E and 3E and 4E and 1E and 2E and 3E and 4E and You may have heard that pattern before in songs. Think right now about every song that you hear that has almost like a Caribbean feel to it. Right? So Despacito, all these songs that are popular, major popular music hits that will have Latin themes in them have some form of a clave throughout the song, and that's really the rhythmic key, and that's why they make you want to move, right? So we go a little bit deeper into that in the chapter. So make sure you understand the key terms in this, right? Because that's going to be important for both the quiz and the unit exam coming up. So make sure the key terms are something that you keep track of. You might want to keep these on your own document somewhere and just maybe even write out the definitions of them so that you have some memorization and ownership over those. And the key people. So the big ones I want you to center in on here are going to be Duke Ellington, Louis Armstrong, Paul Whiteman, Vernon and Irene Castle, King Joe Oliver. Okay. And that's it for this chapter as far as this lecture goes. Stay tuned for our unit exam. There's a writing assignment that's coming up, and then we have a discussion this week, as well as an extra video on Ain't Misbehaving. And make sure you keep your eyes on the syllabi for any changes. Right now, I'm still going to be sticking the listening in right in the same post as this lecture. So everything should be pretty clear. I only introduce the information as it becomes relevant and new so that I don't pull you guys out of what you need to do at this point in the class, and just keep your eyes on the next thing that's due. Because I know you're busy. All right. I hope you guys are enjoying this. This is really starting to heat up. It's heating up. All right. Talk to you soon.